The black sedan came to a sputtering halt on the dusty Montana highway, steam rising from under the hood like morning fog. Rebecca Shung gripped the steering wheel and let out a frustrated sigh. Of all the places for her car to break down, it had to be in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but rolling hills and endless sky stretching in every direction. She stepped out of the car, her designer heels clicking against the asphalt. The August sun beat down mercilessly, and she could already feel sweat forming on her forehead. Her expensive suit, perfect for boardroom meetings in downtown Chicago, felt completely out of place in this remote landscape. Rebecca pulled out her phone, hoping for a signal. 1 bar. Maybe 2 if she held it just right. She tried calling roadside assistance, but the call kept dropping. The nearest town was at least 20 miles away, and she hadn't seen another car for the past hour. Great, she muttered, looking at her watch. She was supposed to be in Millbrook by evening to prepare for tomorrow's court hearing. This case could make or break her career at the law firm, and here she was, stuck like some helpless damsel in distress. The sound of an approaching truck made her look up. An old blue pickup was coming down the road, moving at a leisurely pace. As it got closer, she could see a man behind the wheel, wearing a cowboy hat. The truck slowed and pulled over behind her car. Rebecca immediately felt her guard go up. She'd learned long ago to be cautious around strange men, especially in isolated places like this. She crossed her arms and watched as the driver got out. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with sun-weathered skin and hands that looked like they'd seen plenty of hard work. His jeans were faded, his boots worn, and his hat had definitely seen better days. But there was something steady about the way he carried himself, something that didn't scream danger. "Having some trouble?" he asked, nodding toward her car. His voice was calm, with a slight western drawl. "Just a little overheating," Rebecca replied, keeping her distance. "I've already called for help." The man, who looked to be in his early 30s, walked over to her car and peered under the hood. "Mind if I take a look?" "I'm pretty good with engines," Rebecca hesitated. Every instinct told her not to trust a stranger, but she was also practical. If he could fix her car, she'd be back on the road in no time. "I suppose that would be fine." He popped the hood and examined the engine. For a few minutes, occasionally touching different parts and making small humming sounds. "Your radiator hose has a small tear," he said finally. "Nothing too serious, but it'll keep overheating if you don't fix it." "How much is this going to cost me?" Rebecca asked, already calculating the delay this would cause. The cowboy looked surprised. "Cost you? I've got some spare hose in my truck. Won't take but a few minutes to patch it up." Rebecca stared at him. In her world, nobody did anything for free. There was always an angle, always something they wanted in return. "What's the catch?" "No catch," he said, already walking back to his truck. "Just being neighborly." As he worked on her car, Rebecca found herself studying him. His movements were efficient and confident, like someone who'd been fixing things his whole life. He didn't try to make small talk or ask personal questions. He just focused on the job. "There," he said after about 10 minutes, wiping his hands. "On an old rag. That should get you where you're going. Though you'll want to get it properly fixed when you reach town." "Thank you," Rebecca said, genuinely surprised by his kindness. "Let me pay you something for your time and the parts." The cowboy shook his head. "No need for that." "At least let me buy you dinner," Rebecca heard herself saying. The words came out before she could stop them, and she immediately regretted it. She didn't make impulsive offers like that, especially not to strange men on deserted highways. He paused, considering. "There's a decent place in town. Murphy's Diner. Nothing fancy, but the food's good." Rebecca felt a familiar chill run down her spine. Here it comes, she thought. The real reason he'd helped her. She'd seen this pattern too many times before. Men who seemed helpful and kind only to reveal their true intentions later. "I knew it," she said, her voice turning cold. "You didn't?" "Fix my car out of kindness. You want me for my body." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Rebecca had learned to be direct about these things. Better to call it out early than be disappointed later. The cowboy looked at her. For a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, To her complete surprise, he started to laugh. Not in a mocking way, but like he'd heard something genuinely amusing. "Ma'am," he said, adjusting his hat, "I can honestly say that's not why I asked you to dinner." "Then why?" Rebecca demanded. Crossing her arms again, he was quiet for a moment, studying her face. When he spoke, his voice was serious. "Because you don't beg," Rebecca blinked. "What?" "You don't beg," he repeated. "You didn't bat your eyelashes when your car broke down. You didn't play helpless or put on some act to get me to help you. You stood there, dealing with your problem like a grown woman. You offered to pay me fairly. For my work. You spoke your mind directly when you thought I had bad intentions." He paused. "In my experience, that's pretty rare." Rebecca felt like the ground had shifted under her feet. In all her years of dealing with men, from her ex-fiancé to her male colleagues, no one had ever said anything like that to her. Most women I've known either expect special treatment because they're pretty, or they act like they can't handle anything on their own, the cowboy continued. "You're different. You handle your business. That's refreshing." "You're serious," Rebecca said, more as a statement than a question. "Dead serious." He extended his hand. "I'm Cole, by the way. Cole Harrison." She shook his hand, still processing his words. "Rebecca Shun." "Well, Rebecca Shun, the offer for dinner still stands. No expectations, no agenda. Just two people sharing a meal and maybe some conversation," he smiled. "But if you'd rather get back on the road, I understand completely." Rebecca looked at this man who had just turned her entire worldview upside down with a few simple sentences. He wasn't trying to charm her or impress her. He wasn't making any moves or giving her that look she'd grown so tired of. He was just being honest. "Murphy's Diner, you said?" "Best chicken fried steak in 3 counties, Cole confirmed. "I suppose I do need to eat," Rebecca said slowly. "And I should thank you properly for fixing my car." "No thanks necessary," Cole said. "But I'd enjoy the company." As they walked to their respective vehicles, Rebecca found herself in unfamiliar territory. For the first time in years, a man had surprised her. Not with flashy gestures or smooth words, but with something much more unexpected, genuine respect. For her independence, she followed Cole's truck toward town, her mind racing. What did he mean about not begging? And why did his observation about her handling her problems make her feel both proud and slightly uncomfortable? As the small town of Millbrook came into view, Rebecca realized she was about to have dinner with a complete stranger who seemed to see something in her that she'd never quite recognized in herself. The thought was both terrifying and oddly exciting. Little did she know that this chance encounter on a lonely highway would challenge everything. She thought she knew about herself, about men, and about what it really meant to be valued for who you truly are. The next morning, Rebecca sat in her hotel room staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Cole's words from dinner kept echoing in her mind. "You don't beg?" She'd barely slept, tossing and turning as memories she'd tried to bury kept surfacing. She remembered being 12 years old, standing in the kitchen doorway, watching her mother cry over unpaid bills. Her father had left 3 months earlier, claiming he needed space to find himself. What he'd really found was his secretary, 20 years younger and blonde. Rebecca could still hear her mother's voice on the phone, pleading with him to come back, promising to be better, to change whatever he wanted her to change. "Please, David," her mother had begged. "Rebecca needs her father. I need you." But begging hadn't brought him back. It had only made her mother look smaller, more desperate. Rebecca had sworn that day she would never sound like that. Never let anyone have that kind of power over her. She splashed cold water on her face and got ready for court. Focus, she told herself. This case was why she was here, not some cowboy with mysterious compliments. Meanwhile, 20 miles outside town, Cole was already 2 hours into his morning routine. The sun was barely up, but the horses needed feeding and the fence in the north. Pasture wasn't going to fix itself. He moved through his tasks with practiced efficiency, but his mind kept wandering to the woman from yesterday. That there had been something in Rebecca's eyes when she'd accused him of having ulterior motives. Not just suspicion, but something deeper, paying maybe. Like she'd been hurt before and was just waiting for it to happen again. Cole understood that feeling better than he cared to admit. He thought about Linda, his ex-wife, and how their marriage had slowly crumbled over 5 years. She'd started small, making little comments about the ranch house being too old, too isolated. Then came the suggestions about moving to the city, about him finding a real job that paid better. "You could work for my father's company," Linda had said during one of their last real conversations. "He likes you. You'd make 3 times what you make here." "This is my home," Cole had replied. "My grandfather built this place. My father expanded it. It's not just a job, it's who I am." "Who you are isn't enough for me anymore," she'd shot back. And those words had cut deeper than any physical blow. The final fight had happened on a rainy Tuesday in March. Linda had come home with brochures for houses in Denver, acting like moving was already decided. "I found the perfect place," she'd said, spreading the glossy papers across their kitchen table. 4 bedrooms, 2-car garage, and it's in a great neighborhood. My father already talked to his friend about getting you a position." "Linda, we've talked about this," Cole had said, trying to keep his voice calm. "I'm not leaving the ranch." "Then what exactly are you offering me?" she demanded. "A life of isolation, struggling to pay bills, never going anywhere or doing anything?" "I'm offering you a partnership," Cole had said. "A life we build together." "That's not enough," Linda had said quietly. "I need more than this. I deserve more than this." She'd left the next morning, taking most of her things and leaving only a note that said she'd file for divorce when she got settled in Denver. She'd remarried within a year to an investment banker who could give her the lifestyle she wanted. Cole had learned something important from that experience. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. Linda had never loved the ranch, never loved the life they could have built together. She'd loved the idea of changing him into someone else. That's why Rebecca's independence had caught his attention. She hadn't tried to charm him or manipulate him. She'd been direct, even confrontational. There was something honest about that. Something real. Back in town, Rebecca was finishing up her morning court session when her phone rang. The name on the screen made her stomach clench. Bradley Morrison, her ex-fiancé. "Hello, Bradley," she answered, stepping into the courthouse hallway. "Rebecca! I heard through the grapevine that you're handling the Millbrook case. That's a big, opportunity." She could picture him perfectly, sitting in his corner office, that calculating smile on his face. Bradley had been everything she thought she wanted. Successful, charming, from the right family. They'd dated for 2 years, been engaged for 6 months, and she genuinely believed they were building something meaningful together. "What do you want, Bradley?" she asked. "Can't an old friend call to wish you luck?" His voice had that familiar, smooth quality that had once made her feel special. Now it just made her tired. "We both know you don't do anything without a reason." Bradley chuckled. "You always were too smart for your own good. Look, I've got a proposition. My firm is looking to expand into environmental law, and if you win this case, it could be a big feather in your cap. Come work for us. I'll make sure you get fast-tracked to partner." Rebecca felt that old familiar knot form in her stomach. Bradley's offers always came with strings attached. "And what would you get out of this arrangement?" "Come on, Rebecca. We were good together, we made a great team. Maybe it's time we gave that another shot." She remembered the night she'd found. The texts on his phone? Messages to his assistant, to a client, to what seemed like half the women in Chicago. When she'd confronted him, he'd acted like she was being unreasonable. "It doesn't mean anything," he'd said. "You're the one I'm marrying. They're just distractions." "Distractions?" She'd repeated, hardly believing what she was hearing. "Look, you're beautiful, you're smart, you're going to be a great wife and mother someday. But you're also intense, Rebecca. Sometimes a guy needs something lighter, more fun." That conversation had ended their engagement and taught her another hard lesson about trusting men who claim to want her for the right reasons. "The answer is no, Bradley," she said into the phone. "Think about it," he pressed. You don't want to spend your whole career in small towns handling property disputes. You're meant for bigger things. I said, no, Rebecca, be smart about this. You're not getting any younger, and opportunities like this don't come around often. Don't let your pride get in the way of your future. She hung up without another word, her hands shaking slightly. Even now, years later, Bradley still had the ability to make her feel small and foolish for wanting something real instead of settling for something convenient. The rest of the day passed in a blur of legal research and case preparation. By evening, Rebecca found herself walking through Millbrook's small downtown, trying to clear her head. The town was quiet, with just a few locals moving about their business. She passed Murphy's Diner and saw Cole's truck parked outside. Through the window, she could see him sitting alone at a corner booth, reading what looked like a farming magazine. He seemed completely comfortable with his own company, not checking his phone or looking around for attention. For a moment she considered going in, but what would be the point? She was leaving town as soon as this case was over, heading back to her real life in Chicago. Getting involved with someone here would just complicate things. As she walked back to her hotel, Rebecca realized why Cole's comment had affected her so much. All her life she'd encountered two types of men, those who wanted to change her into something more convenient, and those who wanted to use her for something temporary. She'd built her walls high enough to keep both types out, but what if there was a third type? What if there were men who actually valued the very qualities she'd been told were problems? Her directness, her independence, her refusal to need rescuing? The thought was both exciting and terrifying, because if Cole was different, if he really meant what he'd said, then maybe she'd been protecting herself from the wrong things all along. Monday morning brought unexpected news to Rebecca's hotel room. Her assistant called with an update that made her heart sink. The land dispute case is more complicated than we thought, Jennifer explained over the phone. The property records go back over a century, and there are multiple claims to review. The partners want you to stay and handle this thoroughly. They're thinking at least 3 weeks, maybe 4. Rebecca stared out her hotel window at the quiet main street of Millbrook. 3 weeks in a town where the biggest excitement seemed to be the daily arrival of the mail truck. Are you serious? Dead serious, Mr. Peterson said. This case could set a precedent for similar disputes across the state. He wants our best work. After hanging up, Rebecca tried to look on the bright side. More time meant she could build a stronger case. It also meant more billable hours, which the partners always appreciated. But it also meant being stuck in a place where she'd already started letting her guard down around a certain cowboy. She decided to start her extended stay with a proper breakfast at Murphy's Diner as she walked in. The bell above the door chimed, and several locals looked up from their coffee and morning newspapers. Small towns, she remembered, where everyone notices everything. You must be the lawyer lady, said the waitress, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a ponytail. I'm Betty. Heard you're helping with the Henderson property situation. Word travels fast around here, Rebecca replied, taking a seat at the counter. Honey, in a town this size, someone sneezes on one end and folks on the other end say, "Bless you," Betty laughed. Coffee? As Betty poured her coffee, Rebecca noticed a familiar blue pickup truck pulling up outside. Her stomach did a little flip as Cole stepped out, wearing clean jeans and a button-down shirt instead of his work clothes. He walked in and nodded politely to Rebecca before taking a seat 2 stools down. Morning, Betty. The usual, please. Coming right up, sugar. Betty turned to Rebecca. Cole, here's one of our finest citizens. Helped my husband fix our roof last month, wouldn't take a penny for it. Rebecca glanced at Cole, who looked uncomfortable with the praise. Just being neighborly, he said quietly. That's what he always says, Betty continued, clearly enjoying the chance to talk. But when old Mr. Peterson's barn caught fire last spring, Cole was there with his truck and crew before the fire department arrived. Saved most of Peterson's equipment. Betty, Cole said, his voice carrying a gentle warning. Oh, hush. Someone needs to sing your praises since you won't do it yourself. She turned back to Rebecca. This man's helped half the town at one point or another. Never asks for anything in return. Rebecca found herself studying Cole as Betty continued her commentary. He seemed genuinely embarrassed by the attention, focused on his coffee cup like it held the secrets of the universe. When Betty moved to help another customer, Cole looked over at Rebecca. Sorry about that. Betty means well, but she likes to talk. She seems to think highly of you, Cole shrugged. People help each other out here. It's just how things work. Not everywhere, Rebecca said without thinking, something in her tone made Cole look at her more carefully. Different world in the city? Very different. She took a sip of her coffee, surprised by how good it was. How long have you lived here? My whole life, except for college. Went to Colorado State for agricultural engineering, came back to run the family ranch. He paused. What about you? Always been a lawyer. Feels like it? My mother wanted me to have a career where I'd never have to depend on anyone else. Rebecca realized she'd shared more than she intended. There was something about Cole that made conversation feel natural. Unguarded, their breakfast arrived, and they ate in comfortable silence, occasionally commenting on the weather or the town. When Cole finished, he stood to leave. See you around? He said simply. Probably, Rebecca replied, watching him go. Over the next week, she seemed to run into Cole everywhere. Tuesday, she was at Peterson's hardware store, buying a desk lamp for her hotel room, when he walked in carrying a broken fence post. Trouble with the ranch? She asked. Always something that needs fixing, he replied with a smile. How's the legal work going? Slowly. Turns out property law from the 1800s is more complicated than modern contracts. Cole nodded toward the broken post in his hands. Things from the past have a way of causing problems in the present. Something about the way he said it made Rebecca wonder if he was talking about more than fence posts. Wednesday. She was getting lunch at the small grocery store when she overheard Cole talking to Mrs. Rodriguez, an elderly woman who seemed frustrated about something. I just don't understand these new pill bottles, Mrs. Rodriguez was saying. The caps are so hard to open and the print is so small I can't read the instructions. Would you like me to take a look? Cole offered. Sometimes. They have safety caps that need a special twist. He spent 10 minutes helping her organize her medications and reading the instructions. Aloud in both English and Spanish, Mrs. Rodriguez patted his arm gratefully when he finished. You're such a good boy, Cole. Your mother raised you right. As they left the store at the same time, Rebecca couldn't help commenting. You speak Spanish? Picked it up over the years. About half the ranch hands in this area are Spanish speakers. Seemed rude not to learn. That was kind, what you did for Mrs. Rodriguez. Cole looked puzzled. She needed help. I had time. His matter-of-fact response surprised her. In Chicago, people calculated the cost of every interaction. Here was someone who helped simply because help was needed. Thursday brought the town's weekly farmers market in the small park near the courthouse. Rebecca decided to walk through during her lunch break, curious about local life. She was examining some fresh tomatoes when she heard a commotion nearby. A teenage boy was arguing with one of the vendors, his voice getting louder and more upset. I told you I'd pay you back. Why won't anyone trust me? Tyler, calm down, the vendor said firmly. You still owe me $20 from last month. This is different. My mom's sick and we need groceries. Rebecca watched the scene unfold, recognizing the desperation in the boy's voice. She was about to intervene when Cole appeared, seemingly from nowhere. Hey, Tyler, Cole said calmly. What's going on? Mr. Harrison, nobody believes me when I say I'll pay them back. Mom's been in bed for 3 days with the flu and we're out of food, Cole nodded thoughtfully. Tell you what, how about you come help me clean out my barn this weekend? Fair pay for fair work. That'll give you money for groceries and help you catch up on what you owe Mr. Patterson here. The boy's face lit up. Really? You do that? Course. But you need to follow through, Tyler. A man's word is his bond. I will, I promise. As the crowd dispersed, Rebecca found herself walking alongside Cole. You didn't have to do that. Kids. Been having a rough time since his dad left. Sometimes people just need a chance to earn their way instead of taking charity. How did you know he wasn't just trying to get something for nothing? Cole stopped walking and looked at her. How did you know he was? The question hit her harder than she expected. She realized she'd automatically assumed the worst about the teenager's motives, while Cole had looked for a way to help that preserve the boy's dignity. I guess I'm used to people having angles, she admitted. Most people here don't have angles, Cole said quietly. They just have problems that need solving. That evening, Rebecca sat in her hotel room thinking about the past few days. In Chicago, she was surrounded by people who wanted something from her, clients who needed her expertise, colleagues who saw her as competition, men who wanted to use her or change her. But here in Millbrook, she was watching Cole move through his community like a man who genuinely cared about the people around him. He didn't help for recognition or reward. He didn't keep score of favors owed. He just saw needs and tried to meet them. What kind of person did that make her, she wondered, that she found such simple kindness so surprising. Friday morning, she was back at Murphy's for coffee when Cole walked in. This time, instead of keeping distance between them, he took the stool right next to hers. Mind if I sit? Free country, she replied. But she was smiling, as they sat drinking coffee and watching the town wake up outside the window. Rebecca realized something had shifted. She was looking forward to these chance encounters. Cole's steady presence had become something she anticipated rather than something she was suspicious of. The thought should have worried her. Instead, it felt like the first deep breath she'd taken in years. Saturday evening brought Millbrook's annual Harvest Festival, and Rebecca found herself with nowhere else to be. Her hotel room felt too small after a week of legal documents and property surveys, so she decided to see what a small-town festival looked like. The main street had been blocked off, with booths selling everything from handmade crafts to kettle corn. String lights hung between the buildings, and a small stage at one end featured a local band playing country music. Families walked around with children clutching balloons and cotton candy, and the whole scene felt like something from a movie. Rebecca felt oddly out of place in her business casual clothes while everyone else wore jeans and comfortable shoes. She was considering heading back to her room when she spotted Cole near the ring toss booth, talking to the same teenager from the farmers market. Remember what I said about follow-through, Tyler? Cole was saying. You promised to clean my barn tomorrow morning at 8. I'll be there, Mr. Harrison. I won't let you down. I know you won't. Cole handed the boy a few dollars. Go have some fun. You've earned it. Tyler grinned and ran off toward the games. Cole turned and saw Rebecca watching the interaction. Didn't expect to see you here, he said, walking over. Didn't have anywhere else to be, she admitted. Besides, I was curious about small-town festivals. First time? Growing up in the city, our entertainment was usually indoor malls and movie theaters. Cole nodded toward the crowd. Want to see what you missed? They walked together through the festival, and Rebecca found herself seeing it through Cole's eyes. He knew practically everyone, but his interactions were brief and genuine. No fake small talk or forced enthusiasm, just real connections with people he'd known for years. At the apple pie contest booth, an older woman with flour-dusted hands waved them over. Cole Harrison, you better try my pie this year. I finally got my grandmother's recipe right. Can't pass up your apple pie, Mrs. Chun, Cole said, accepting a small paper plate. He took a bite and closed his eyes for a moment. That's perfect, Mrs. Chun. Your grandmother would be proud. The woman beamed. You always know just what to say. As they moved on, Rebecca noticed something. You complimented her pie, but you didn't try to charm her or make a big show of it. Why would I do that? Most men I know would have laid it on thick. Told her she was the best baker in 3 states, made a big production of it. Cole looked genuinely puzzled. But then she wouldn't know if I really meant it. They stopped at a booth selling homemade jewelry, where a young woman with paint-stained fingers was arranging silver bracelets. Evening, Amy, Cole said. How's the art school application going? I got in. Amy practically bounced with excitement. Full scholarship to Colorado School of Art. I leave in January. That's wonderful. Your parents must be proud. They are. Now, Amy laughed. Took some convincing that art was a real career, but when I showed them the scholarship letter, Dad finally came around. After they moved away, Rebecca asked, "How did you know about her art school plans?" "She's been talking about it for 2 years. Been saving every penny from these craft sales to pay for applications. You remember details like that about everyone?" Cole shrugged. "People tell you what matters to them if you listen." They found a quiet spot near the bandstand where they could watch the festivities. The band was playing a slow country song, and several couples were dancing on the makeshift dance floor in front of the stage. "Can I ask you something?" Rebecca said after they'd been sitting in comfortable silence for a while. "Sure, that first." "Day, when you said I don't beg, what did you really mean by that?" Cole was quiet for a long moment, watching the dancers. "You want the honest answer? I wouldn't have asked otherwise. Most women I've known, they either expect special treatment because they're beautiful, or they act helpless to get attention." He glanced at her. "You didn't do either of those things." "How? Do you know I'm not just playing hard to get?" Cole smiled slightly. "Because when your car broke down, you didn't flutter your eyelashes or act like you couldn't handle it. You stood there dealing with the problem like a capable adult. When I offered to help, you didn't assume I was trying to rescue you. You let me fix your car, but you offered to pay me fairly for the work." Rebecca felt something shift inside her chest. "Those seem like basic things. They should be, but they're not as common as you'd think." "What about when I accused you of having ulterior motives? You were direct about it. No games, no hints, no expecting me to read your mind. You said exactly what you were thinking." Cole turned to look at her fully. "Do you know how rare that is?" Rebecca thought about all the times she'd been criticized for being too direct, too confrontational, too independent. Her ex-fiancé Bradley had constantly told her she needed to be more diplomatic, more subtle, more feminine. "Most people tell me I'm too blunt." "Most people are afraid of honesty," Cole replied. "It's easier to dance around the truth than deal with it directly." A group of teenagers ran past them, laughing and chasing each other toward the game booths. Cole watched them with a slight smile. "My ex-wife used to say I was too simple," he said quietly. "Said I lacked ambition because I was happy with ranch life. She wanted me to want more, to be restless and unsatisfied with what we had. But you weren't." "No, I wasn't. I loved our life, or I thought I did. Turns out she was playing a role, waiting for me to change into someone different." He paused. "When she left, she said I was too content, too satisfied with small things." "Like that?" Was a character flaw. Rebecca felt a strange ache in her chest. "That must have hurt." "It did. But it also taught me something important." "What's that?" "There's a difference between someone who loves you and someone who loves the idea of changing you." The words hit Rebecca like a physical blow. She thought about Bradley, who had loved the idea of having a successful, beautiful wife but wanted to change everything about her personality. Her father, who had loved the idea of family until it required actual commitment and sacrifice. "You really mean that," she said, more to herself than to him. "I don't say things I don't mean." They sat in silence again. But it felt different now, heavier, like something important had been said, even if Rebecca wasn't entirely sure what it was. "Can I tell you something?" Rebecca found herself saying, "Of course. I've spent most of my adult life being told I'm too much. Too direct, too independent, too focused on my career. Too intimidating, too self-sufficient." She looked down at her hands. "I learned to see those things as problems to solve. What if they're not problems?" The question hung between them like a challenge. What if the very things she'd been trying to soften about herself were actually strengths? What if the right person wouldn't want to change them? "I don't know how to believe that," she admitted. "Maybe that's something you figure out over time." The band finished their song and several couples left the dance floor. Cole stood up and extended his hand to Rebecca. "Dance with me." It wasn't a question, but it wasn't a demand either. Just a simple request from someone who had somehow managed to surprise her at every turn. Rebecca looked at his outstretched hand. Calloused from years of ranch work, steady and patient. She thought about all the men who had tried to impress her with flashy gestures and smooth words. Here was someone offering something much simpler and somehow more meaningful. She took his hand as they moved onto the dance floor and Cole's arms came around her. Rebecca realized she was dancing with a man who valued her strength instead of seeing it as something to overcome. For the first time in her adult life, she felt like someone was seeing the real her and choosing to stay close instead of stepping back. The thought was both terrifying and wonderful, like standing at the edge of a cliff and realizing you might actually want to jump. Monday morning brought the kind of news that changes everything. Rebecca was at her makeshift office in the hotel, surrounded by stacks of property documents, when she found the file that made her stomach drop. Harrison Ranch, Cole Harrison, property. Ona. She stared at the name on the legal documents, reading it 3 times to make sure she wasn't mistaken. The land dispute case she'd been working on for 2 weeks wasn't some abstract legal matter involving strangers. It was about Cole's ranch, his family's land. His home. Her hands trembled slightly as she read through the details. A development company called Mountain Vista Properties wanted to build a luxury resort and golf course. They claimed Cole's ranch was built on land that should have reverted to the county decades ago due to unpaid taxes from the 1970s. The legal technicality was complicated, buried in old records and forgotten paperwork, but it was real, and Rebecca was representing Mountain Vista Properties. She sat back in her chair, feeling like the air had been knocked out of her lungs. How had she not made the connection? Harrison was a common enough name, and she'd been so focused on the legal details that she hadn't thought to connect her case to the man she'd been getting to know. The man she'd been falling for. Her phone rang, startling her. The caller ID showed her boss, Mr. Peterson. "Rebecca, I hope you're making progress on the Henderson case," he said without preamble. "Mountain Vista is getting impatient. They want this ranch deal wrapped up quickly so they can start construction in the spring." "Henderson case?" Rebecca repeated, confused. "The Harrison property. I know the files say Harrison, but Mountain Vista has been calling it the Henderson case in all their communications. Something about the original property owner's name. Anyway, they're paying us a lot of money to make this problem go away." Rebecca felt sick. "Mr. Peterson, I need to review the ethical implications of this case. I might have a conflict of interest." "What kind of conflict? You don't know anyone in that small town, do you?" She thought about Cole's hands fixing her car, his quiet kindness at the festival, the way he'd looked at her when they danced. "I might have developed a personal relationship with someone involved in the case." "Personal relationship?" "Peterson's." Voice sharpened. "Rebecca, you've been there for 2 weeks. How personal could it be?" "Personal enough that I'm not sure I can represent the client objectively." There was a long pause. "Rebecca, let me be very clear about something. This case is worth more than your yearly salary to this firm. Mountain Vista Properties is the kind of client that can make careers. If you're telling me you can't handle this because you've developed feelings for some local cowboy, then maybe you're not partnership material after all." The threat was clear, even though Peterson hadn't said it directly. "Handle the case or watch her career prospects disappear." "I understand," Rebecca said quietly. "Good. I want a preliminary report by Wednesday showing how we can expedite this process. Mountain Vista wants to move fast." After Peterson hung up, Rebecca sat staring at the documents spread across her desk. She'd worked her entire adult life for partnership at this firm. It represented security, success, everything she'd dreamed of since law school. But now it meant destroying the home of a man who'd shown her what genuine kindness looked like. She spent the rest of Monday avoiding Cole, taking her meals at different times and staying hidden in her hotel room. But Tuesday brought another complication she couldn't avoid. Tyler, the teenager Cole had offered work to, knocked on her door. "Miss Chun? Could I talk to you for a minute?" Rebecca opened the door, surprised to see the boy looking worried and upset. "What's wrong, Tyler?" "It's about Mr. Harrison. My mom heard something at the grocery store about someone trying to take his ranch away. Is that true?" Rebecca's heart sank. In a small town, secrets didn't stay secret for long. "Tyler, I can't really discuss ongoing legal matters, but you're a lawyer, right? And you know Mr. Harrison, he's been really good to our family. When Dad left, Mr. Harrison hired my older brother for weekend work, even though he didn't really need the help. He knew we were struggling. Tyler. And when Mom got sick last month, he showed up with groceries. Didn't make a big deal about. It just said he'd bought too much stuff and didn't want it to go to waste, but we knew. Tyler's voice cracked slightly. That ranch has been in his family forever. His grandfather built the house. His dad expanded the land. It's not just property to him, it's everything. After Tyler left, Rebecca found herself walking through town, trying to clear her head. She ended up at the small park where the festival had been held just days ago. The decorations were gone, leaving only an empty bandstand and the memory of dancing with Cole under the string lights. She was sitting on a bench, staring at nothing, when Cole's truck pulled up. "Thought I might find you here," he said, walking over. "You've been hard to track down the past couple days." Rebecca's chest tightened. He looked the same as always, steady, calm, genuine. He had no idea that she was the person trying to take away everything that mattered to him. "Been busy with work," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. Cole sat down beside her on the bench. "Heard there's some legal trouble brewing about my ranch." Rebecca's heart stopped. "What have you heard?" "Not much. Betty mentioned something about developers sniffing around, asking questions about old property records. Then Tyler came by this morning all worked up, saying someone was trying to steal my land." Cole looked at her sideways. "You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" The direct question hit her like a slap. Here was her chance to tell him the truth, to be the honest, straightforward person he'd admired. But the words stuck in her throat. "I don't know all the details," she said finally, which was technically true but felt like the worst kind of lie. Cole studied her face for a long moment. "Rebecca, is everything okay? You seem different." "Just tired." "This case is more complicated than I expected." "What kind of case are you working on exactly?" Rebecca felt trapped. Every question pushed her deeper into deception, but telling the truth felt impossible. How could she explain that she was representing the people trying to destroy his families? "Legacy? Property law?" "Boring stuff," she said, hating herself for each word. Cole nodded slowly, but something in his expression had changed. "Well, if you hear anything about my situation, I'd appreciate a heads up. This ranch is all I have left of my family." "Of course," Rebecca whispered. That evening, Rebecca called her best friend from law school, desperate for advice. "Lisa, I need help. I'm in an impossible situation." "What's going on?" Rebecca explained everything: the case, Cole, the conflict of interest, Peterson's threats about her career. "Rebecca, this is serious," Lisa said after hearing the whole story. "You need to recuse yourself from this case immediately. There's, no question about it. But Peterson made it clear that would end my partnership chances. And staying on the case could end your legal career entirely if anyone finds out you had a personal relationship with the opposing party and didn't disclose it. What if I handle it professionally, keep my feelings separate from the work?" Lisa was quiet for a moment. "Rebecca, listen to yourself. You're talking about destroying the home of someone you care about for a job. Is that really who you want to be?" After hanging up, Rebecca sat in her hotel room staring at her laptop screen. She had a choice to make, and both options felt like they would destroy something important that she could come clean to Cole, withdraw from the case, and watch her career prospects crumble. Or she could stay silent, do her job, and betray the first man who'd ever valued her for who she really was. As she sat there in the growing darkness, Rebecca realized that this moment would define not just her career, but the kind of person she was going to be. The question was, did she have the courage to choose the harder path? Outside her window, Cole's truck drove slowly down Main Street, and Rebecca wondered if he was starting to suspect that the woman he'd trusted was the same, one who held his future in her hands. Wednesday morning arrived with the kind of gray sky that matched Rebecca's mood perfectly. She'd spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, wrestling with her conscience and coming up empty. The preliminary report from Mountain Vista was due today, but every time she tried to write it, Cole's face appeared in her mind. She was nursing her third cup of coffee at Murphy's Diner when inspiration struck. Maybe there was a third option she hadn't considered. What if she could find a legal loophole that would save Cole's ranch while still satisfying her firm? It was a long shot, but it was better than the impossible choice she'd been facing. Rebecca spent the morning diving deeper into the property records than she'd ever gone before. She traced ownership back to the 1800s, examined every deed transfer, every tax payment, every legal document she could find. And then, buried in a pile of dusty county records, she found it, a quitclaim deed from 1978, properly filed and notarized, showing that Cole's father had actually paid the disputed back taxes in full. The county had somehow failed to update their records, creating the appearance of an unpaid debt that didn't actually exist. It was exactly the kind of bureaucratic error that could void Mountain Vista's entire claim. Her hand shook as she photocopied the document. This was it. This was the evidence that could save Cole's ranch and end the case in his favor. But it also meant deliberately sabotaging her own client's interests. Rebecca sat in her car outside the county courthouse, staring at the copied deed in her hands. She thought about her partnership prospects, her career, everything she'd worked for. Then she thought about Cole fixing her car on a dusty highway, asking nothing in return. Except dinner with someone who didn't beg. She made her choice. The drive to Cole's ranch took 20 minutes, but it felt like the longest 20 minutes of her life. She'd never been to his property before, and as she turned up the gravel driveway, she was struck by how beautiful it was. Rolling pastures stretched toward the mountains, with cattle grazing peacefully in the distance. The house was modest but well-maintained, with a wide front porch and flower boxes that someone clearly tended with care. Cole was working on a fence near the barn when she pulled up. He looked surprised to see her, setting down his tools and walking over to her car. "Rebecca, what brings you out here?" She got out of the car, clutching the legal documents in her hands. "Cole, I need to tell you something important." "Okay," he said slowly, clearly sensing something was wrong from her tone. "Let's sit down first." They walked to his front porch, where two old rocking chairs faced the mountain view. Rebecca had rehearsed this conversation in her head a dozen times, but now that the moment was here, she didn't know where to start. "Cole, that legal case I've been working on, the property dispute I mentioned, yeah? It's about your ranch. I'm representing the company that's trying to take your land." The words hung in the air between them like a bomb waiting to explode. Cole went very still, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to something that looked like betrayal. "What did you just say?" "Mountain Vista Properties hired my firm to prove they have a legal claim to your property. I've been working on their case for 2 weeks." Rebecca's voice was barely above a whisper. "I didn't know it was your ranch until Monday morning." Cole stood up abruptly, pacing to the edge of the porch. "You've known since Monday that you're trying to steal my family's land, and you didn't tell me." "I wanted to, but what?" Cole turned to face her, as she could see the hurt in his eyes. "But it was more convenient to keep lying to me? To keep pretending to be my friend while you figured out how to destroy my life? It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like, Rebecca?" Cole's voice was controlled, but she could hear the anger underneath. "Were you gathering information? Getting close to me to find weaknesses in my case?" The accusation hit her like a physical blow. "No, Cole, everything between us was real." "My feelings were real. Your feelings?" Cole laughed bitterly. "You think you can talk about feelings after lying to my face for days? After sitting right here on my porch and pretending you didn't know my life was falling apart?" Rebecca stood up, still clutching the documents. "Cole, please let me explain. I found something that changes everything. I don't want to hear it." "But this document proves—" "I said I don't want to hear it." Cole's voice cracked slightly. "Do you have any idea what this ranch means to me? My grandfather cleared this land with his bare hands. My father spent 40 years building this herd. This isn't just property to me, it's my family's legacy. I know that now. You knew it before, Tyler told you. Half the town told you. And you sat there at the festival, you danced with me, you let me tell you about my ex-wife leaving. And the whole time you were planning to take away everything I have left. Rebecca felt tears starting to form. Cole, I never planned any of this. I had no idea when we met that there was any connection, and when I found out, I didn't know what to do. You knew what to do. You just didn't want to do it because it might cost you something. The truth of his words stung because they were partially right. She had known the ethical thing to do, but she'd hesitated because of her career. You're right, she said quietly. I should have told you immediately. I should have withdrawn from the case. I was scared of losing my job, my future, everything I'd worked for, and that was more important than being honest with me. No, it wasn't. That's why I'm here now. Cole shook his head. You're here now because you got caught. If I hadn't started asking questions, would you have ever told me the truth? Rebecca wanted to say yes, but she honestly wasn't sure. I don't know, she admitted. At least that's honest. Cole sat back down heavily in his rocking chair. You know what the worst part is? I actually believed you were different. I thought you were someone who said what she meant, who didn't play games. I am that person. No, you're not. You're just like everyone else who thinks they can use people and justify it later. They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of betrayal settling between them. Finally, Rebecca held out the documents she'd been carrying. Cole, this quitclaim deed proves your father paid those back taxes in 1978. The county never updated their records. Mountain Vista's claim is completely invalid. Cole looked at the papers but didn't take them. Why are you showing me this? Because it saves your ranch. Because I'm withdrawing from the case and turning this evidence over to your lawyer instead of mine. And what do you get out of that? Nothing, Rebecca said. I lose my client, probably my partnership, maybe my job. But you keep your home. Cole finally took the documents, scanning them with growing amazement. This really proves the taxes were paid? It proves everything. Mountain Vista has no case. They'll have to drop their claim. Why? Cole asked, looking up at her. Why would you sacrifice your career for this? Rebecca met his eyes. Because you were right about me, I don't beg. And I don't lie to people I care about, even when it costs me everything. Cole studied her face for a long moment. Rebecca, what you did keeping this from me, I can't just forget that. I know. Trust isn't something you can fix with a legal document. I know that too. But, Cole said slowly, what you're doing now, giving up your case to save my ranch, ... That means something. Rebecca nodded, not trusting herself to speak. I need time to think about all this, Cole said finally. About what it means, about whether we can get past what happened. I understand. As Rebecca drove back to town, she realized that for the first time in days, she felt like herself again. She'd chosen honesty over convenience, integrity over ambition. Whatever happened next with Cole, she could live with the person she'd decided to be. Now she just had to call her boss and explain why she was about to cost the firm its biggest client. The phone call to Mr. Peterson went exactly as badly as Rebecca had expected. You did what? His voice was so loud she had to hold the phone away from her ear. I found evidence that invalidates our client's claim, and I turned it over to the opposing party, Rebecca repeated, sitting in her hotel room with her suitcase open on the bed. Rebecca, are you having some kind of breakdown? Do you understand what you've just done to this firm? I understand that I prevented us from helping. A client steals someone's family ranch based on a clerical error? That's not your decision to make. Your job is to represent our client's interests, not play judge and jury about what's right and wrong. Rebecca took a deep breath. Then I quit. The silence on the other end stretched for nearly 30 seconds. You're making the biggest mistake of your career, Peterson said finally. Mountain Vista will sue us for malpractice. You'll never work at another major firm. I'll make sure of that. I understand. Don't expect any references. Don't expect any help finding new employment. You've burned every bridge you had in this profession. After Peterson hung up, Rebecca sat staring at her phone. In the span of one conversation, she'd destroyed everything she'd spent years building. Her career, her financial security, Her entire professional identity gone, but instead of panic, she felt something unexpected, relief. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't lying to anyone. She wasn't pretending to be someone she wasn't. She'd made a choice based on what was right rather than what was convenient. Now she just had to figure out what came next over the next 3 days. Rebecca stayed in Millbrook, not quite ready to face returning to Chicago. She told herself she was tying up loose ends, making sure the legal documentation was properly transferred to Cole's attorney. But really, she was hoping for a chance to see Cole again, to know if they had any chance of moving past what had happened. She didn't see him at Murphy's Diner or around town. Tyler stopped by her hotel Thursday evening to thank her for saving Mr. Harrison's ranch. But when she asked how Cole was doing, the teenager just shrugged. He's been pretty quiet since Tuesday, working a lot, staying close to home. Friday morning brought an unexpected visitor. Betty from the diner knocked on Rebecca's hotel room door, carrying a thermos of coffee and wearing a concerned expression. "Honey, can we talk?" Rebecca invited her in, grateful for any friendly face. "I heard what you did for Cole," Betty said, settling into the room's only chair. "The whole town's talking about it. That was a brave thing you did. It was the right thing." "I should have done it sooner." "Maybe, but doing the right thing late is still better than not doing it at all." Betty poured coffee into 2 hotel cups. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Sure. Do you love him?" The direct question caught Rebecca off guard. She'd been so focused on the ethics and the betrayal that she hadn't really examined her own feelings. "I think I do," she said quietly. "Which probably makes all this worse." "Why worse?" "Because now he'll never trust me again. And even if he could, I don't have anything to offer him." "No job, no prospects, no future," Betty smiled slightly. "Honey, Cole Harrison isn't the kind of man who cares about what you have. He cares about who you are." "But I lied to him. I hurt him." "Yes, you did. And that's something you'll both have to work through." Betty leaned forward. "But here's what I've learned in 60 years of living. People make mistakes. Good people own up to them and try to do better. That's what you did. I don't think Cole sees it that way. Give him time. He's been hurt before, and it made him careful about trusting people. But he's not the kind to hold a grudge forever." After Betty left, Rebecca found herself walking through town, maybe for the last time. She'd grown to love this place over the past month, the way everyone knew each other, the slower pace, the sense of community she'd never experienced in Chicago. She was passing the hardware store when she overheard a conversation that stopped her in her tracks. "I'm telling you, Cole, you should ask her to stay," old Mr. Peterson was saying to someone inside. "That girl gave up everything to save your ranch. That's not something you find every day." "It's complicated, Mr. Peterson." Rebecca's heart jumped at the sound of Cole's voice. "What's complicated about it?" "She made a mistake, then she fixed it. Cost her plenty to do the right thing. She lied to me for days. How do I know she won't do it again? Son, I've been married for 43 years. Let me tell you something about people. They're going to disappoint you sometimes. The question is what they do about it after." Rebecca hurried away before she could hear Cole's response, but Mr. Peterson's words stayed with her. What had she done about her mistake? She'd fixed it, at great personal cost. But was that enough? Saturday morning, Rebecca loaded her car for the drive back to Chicago. She'd spent one last night in Millbrook, and now it was time to face whatever came next. She'd put out some feelers for job opportunities. But Betty was probably right. Word would spread about what she'd done. And it wouldn't be easy to find work. She was checking out of the hotel when the desk clerk handed her an envelope. "Someone left this for you this morning." Rebecca opened it to find a simple note in Cole's handwriting. "Meet me at the place we first talked about dinner, 2 p.m. Her heart pounded as she drove to the spot on the highway where her car had broken down a month ago. Cole's truck was already there, parked on the shoulder. He was leaning against the tailgate, hat tilted low against the sun. "You came," he said as she got out of her car. "You asked me to." They stood a few feet apart, the distance feeling like a canyon between them. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Cole said. "About trust, about mistakes, about what matters." Rebecca waited, not trusting herself to speak. What you did lying to me about the case, that hurt. It made me question everything I thought I knew about you, Cole, but then I thought about what you did after. You could have kept that document secret, let my ranch get taken, and kept your job. Instead, you sacrificed everything to do what was right. He paused. That tells me something about who you really are. I'm someone who makes terrible decisions and then tries to fix them too late. You're someone who chose integrity over convenience. When it mattered most. They looked at each other across the dusty space where they'd first met. I'm leaving today, Rebecca said. Going back to Chicago to figure out what's left of my life. Cole nodded slowly. I know. Are you going to ask me to stay? No, the word hit her like a slap, even though she'd expected it. Because if I ask you to stay, it would be for me, Cole continued. And you need to decide what you want for yourself, without anyone else's influence? That's who you are, Rebecca. Someone who makes her own choices, lives her own life. Rebecca felt tears starting to form. Even now, even after everything that had happened, he was respecting her independence. What if I don't know what I want? Then you'll figure it out. And whatever you decide, it'll be the right choice because it'll be yours. As Rebecca drove away from Millbrook, watching Cole's figure grow smaller in her rearview mirror, she realized he'd just given her the greatest gift he could, the freedom to choose her own path. Without pressure or obligation, the question was, what would she do with that freedom? 3 months later, Rebecca stood in her cramped Chicago apartment, surrounded by boxes and facing the hardest decision of her life. The job search had been exactly as brutal as Peterson had promised. Word had spread through the legal community about what she'd done, and no major firm would touch her. Some called her ethical, others called her career suicide. Most just called her unemployable, but something unexpected had happened during those long months of rejection letters and closed doors. She'd started sleeping better at night. Her phone rang, interrupting her packing. The caller ID showed a number she'd been hoping to see for weeks. Double quotes, Miss Chung? This is Frank Rodriguez from the Rural Legal Aid Society in Montana. We received your application, and we'd like to discuss a position with you. Rebecca's heart jumped. I'm very interested. I'll be honest, the pay is terrible. About a third of what you made in corporate law. You'd be helping small farmers and ranchers with property disputes, contract issues, things like that. Not very glamorous work. It sounds perfect, Rebecca said, and meant it. There's one thing I should mention. Your former boss, Mr. Peterson, called to warn us about you. Said you can't be trusted to represent clients properly. Rebecca's stomach sank. I see. Thing is, we also got a call from Cole Harrison. He told us a very different story. Said you were the most ethical lawyer he'd ever encountered and that any organization would be lucky to have you. Rebecca had to sit down. Cole had recommended her. After everything that had happened, when can you start? Rodriguez asked. 2 weeks later, Rebecca was back in Montana, but this time in Helena, the state capital. She'd rented a small apartment and opened a practice that specialized in helping people like coal ranchers and farmers who couldn't afford big city lawyers but needed real legal help. Her first client was an elderly woman whose son was trying to force her to sell the family farm. Her second was a young couple fighting a corporation that wanted to run a pipeline through their property. Every case reminded her why she'd gone to law school in the first place, to help people, not to get rich. She hadn't contacted Cole since leaving Millbrook. Part of her wanted to call and thank him for the recommendation, but she remembered his words about making her own choices. This new life she was building, it had to be for herself, not to prove anything to him. Still, she found herself thinking about him often, especially when she drove past ranch properties on her way to court, or when she saw cattle grazing in fields that reminded her of his land. Spring arrived early that year, and with it came Rebecca's biggest case yet. A mining company was using a legal loophole to claim water rights from a group of small ranchers, threatening to dry up streams that had fed their livestock for generations. It was exactly the kind of David versus Goliath battle that made Rebecca remember why she'd chosen this path. She was deep in research one evening when her phone rang. Rebecca, it's Tyler. Tyler, how are you doing? Great. I'm finishing high school next month and I got accepted to college in the fall. He paused. I called because I wanted to thank you again for what you did for Mr. Harrison. You don't need to thank me for that. Actually, I kinda do. See, after you saved his ranch, Mr. Harrison started a scholarship fund for kids from families like mine. Kids whose dads left, whose moms are struggling. He's paying for my first year of college. Rebecca felt her throat tighten. Tyler, that's wonderful. He says it's what the land is for, helping the next generation build something better. He says you taught him that there are still people who'll do the right thing even when it costs them everything. After Tyler hung up, Rebecca sat staring at her phone. Cole had turned his gratitude into help for others, just like she might have. Expected him to do. The next morning brought a surprise visitor to her office. She was reviewing contracts when her secretary knocked. Miss Chun, there's someone here to see you. Says he's from Millbrook. Rebecca's heart stopped. She looked up to see Cole standing in her doorway, hat in his hands, looking exactly the same as the day they'd met. Hello, Rebecca. Cole? She stood up, smoothing her skirt nervously. What are you doing here? Tyler told me he called you last night. I wanted to come thank you in person. For what? For showing me what real integrity looks like. For helping me remember what's worth fighting for. He stepped into her office, looking around at the simple furnishings and the stacks of case files. This suits you. It's not much, but it's honest work. The best kind. Cole moved closer to her desk. I heard about your water rights case. That's a big fight you're taking on. Someone has to stand up for the little guys, even when the little guys can't pay much. Rebecca smiled, especially then. They stood looking at each other across her small office, and Rebecca realized that Cole looked different. Lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. How's the ranch? She asked. Good. Better than good, actually. I've been making some changes, expanding the operation. Turns out almost losing something makes you appreciate it more. I'm glad. Cole set his hat on her desk and sat down in the chair across from her. Rebecca, I need to tell you something. That day you left Millbrook when I didn't ask you to stay. Wanted to. Why didn't you? Because I knew you needed to find your own way. You needed to discover who you were without anyone else's expectations or pressure. He leaned forward. But now I'm hoping you've figured that out. Rebecca felt her heart racing. And what if I have? Then I'd like to make you an offer. What kind of offer? Cole smiled, and it was the same genuine smile that had caught her attention on a dusty highway months ago. I've got a ranch that could use a fence rebuilt. It's hard work, dirty work, and the pay is terrible. But it comes with a good partner, home-cooked meals, and a pretty decent view of the mountains. Rebecca stared at him. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a life. If you want it. Rebecca thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The broken-down car, the lies, the betrayal, the sacrifice, the long months of rebuilding herself from scratch. All of it had led to this office, this work, this choice. I'd have to keep my practice, she said slowly. There are people here who need help. I wouldn't expect anything else. Montana's a big state. Plenty of ranchers and farmers need good legal help. And you're okay with me being independent? Making my own choices? Cole stood up and walked around her desk, stopping close. Enough that she could see the sincerity in his eyes. Rebecca, your independence is what I fell in love with. Your strength, your refusal to compromise who you are, that's not something I want to change. That's something I want to spend the rest of my life supporting. Rebecca reached up and touched his face, feeling the familiar roughness of his skin under her fingers. You know what I realized these past few months? What? All my life, I thought being wanted from my body was the worst thing that could happen to me. But being wanted for my weakness would have been worse. Being wanted because someone thought I needed saving or because I'd make them feel important. And, now I know what it feels like to be wanted for my strength. To be valued for the parts of myself I was always told were too much. She smiled. Turns out, being wanted because I don't beg is the best feeling in the world. 6 months later, Rebecca was indeed rebuilding fences at Cole's ranch. But she was also running a thriving legal practice that served rural communities across 3 counties. Her office was now in Millbrook in a renovated building on Main Street, and her clients paid her in everything from legal fees to fresh vegetables to handmade quilts. Every morning, she woke up next to a man who loved her fierce independence and supported her choices without trying to influence them. Every evening, they worked side by side, building something together while remaining completely themselves. As Rebecca hammered a nail into a fence post on a crisp autumn morning, watching Cole work beside her with easy competence, she realized she'd finally found what she'd been searching for without even knowing it: a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and the understanding that the strongest relationships are made up of two whole people choosing each other every day. Cole said, pausing in his work to look at her. "I think this fence is going to last a long time." Rebecca smiled, wiping sweat from her forehead and looking out over the land they were protecting together. "I think you're right." And as she went back to her work, she knew that the foundation they were building, both literally and figuratively, was strong enough to weather whatever storms might come, because it was built on something real, the kind of love that values strength over beauty, character over convenience, and the courage to choose each other freely every single day.